You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in the space every week. Super excited about today's guest. We had a pre-conversation, which was meant to be a half an hour, and I think it was an hour and a half. So, Ivan, why don't you go ahead and get us started and introduce today's guest?
Hi, I'm Ivan Zach, and super excited to introduce Dr. Jonathan Lustgarten, a colleague and a personal friend of mine. We met, I don't even remember when, but we've intersected in multiple areas, in multiple positions. So Jonathan is a senior biomedical informatics specialist at VCA Animal Hospitals. And that includes the entire Mars organization, as he told us prior to this. The Compassion First Pet Hospital's Director of Informatics. That was prior to that, and that's where we communicated. I was on the side of IDEX selling you things or installing things. Past President of Association of Veterinary Informatics, co-founder and consultant of One Health Company, founder and lead developer of Recovered Systems, DVM degree from University of Pennsylvania, and he has master degrees as well as PhD in bioinformatics, and the PhD is in biomedical informatics from the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. I'm going to stop there because the whole show will be your achievements. On the personal side of things, he's a fan of Pittsburgh Steelers. Jonathan, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming. I'm glad to see you again. How are you doing?
Doing well. It's a crazy time we're all in, but it's definitely doing okay, happy, healthy, and that's, some of the best stuff you can ask for today.
Right. So we could pick up any topic, and as Shawn experienced conversation with you for an hour and a half, we could pick many, but today we're going to try to talk about the veterinary informatics, because that sort of goes throughout your CV and throughout your career. Can you give us a sort of high level, what would you describe veterinary informatics in sort of a one sentence or two sentences? Like, what is it about?
That's hard, but I'll give it my I'll give it my best shot. It's really about the business for an operationalization or usage of data, information, knowledge that in practice and in veterinary medicine that also feeds in on itself. So it's basically the process of how do I get information out of my systems, out of my textbooks, out of my apps, wherever, to help me make better decisions in aspects of veterinary medicine, including research, and then have it feed back in on itself. So I don't always have to I always can build on the next step as opposed to always having to reinvent the step.
That makes tons of sense, and it's pretty exciting. And so when you took this new role with the Mars Group, you must have been super excited, because not only do you guys have more hospitals and more veterinarians than any other group of companies in the world, but you have more data. And so what gets you super excited about the data that exists within that organization? And what problems do you think your experience is going to help you solve for that group?
The fact is that they have such a large group of data that it's exciting, because sometimes you always feel like, I know it's there somewhere. And you're just like, you can spend hours, or doctors, as a doctor, you're looking for a patient record. He says, I know it was in the history somewhere. I have to go find it because I remember reading about it at 1.3 years ago, right? That type of stuff. And so what's really cool is that the systems that many of the Mars veterinary hospitals have really allow you to like pull that data in to improve veterinary health, and not only practice and efficiency, right? Because doctors have to see more patients in less time, but also provide better medicine. And one of the things that, Compassion First was very good to me as well with this is that they are focused on how do I use that information to make the business better and make the patients better. And, as a veterinarian, that really is specific to, like, my goal in life is to basically help pets, right? I became a veterinarian because I love helping animals and treating them. And I realized I could, through basic multiplication, I can actually take, if I help the doctors that are in the Mars Veterinary Health Organization, VCA, obviously primary, and then Mars Veterinary Health, that's through my expanded roles, if I can make their day better, I can make them find that diagnosis faster. If I can make them find the right bit of information, I have taken what I've done and multiplied it by all the animals these doctors have seen. And that is coming back to some of my raison d'etre, is I want to either see the animals myself or help people take care of more animals than I could ever possibly see in my lifetime. Otherwise, I should be seeing the pets. So I want a scale, or I would do it myself.
That's awesome. I love that you said that, because a lot of my classmates and my colleagues are asking me, do you miss practice? I don't think you've been practicing veterinarian as well as the informatics. And that's, I compliment you for that. I've been out of practice for a couple of years, and my classmates are asking me, do you miss medicine? Do you miss vet clinics? When I was with SmartFlow, I was in more clinics than anybody, I think. And I've seen all the experience and all the struggles and everything that's happening with it. And then also, I did feel that way, that I can not only help group of animals, but I can actually help group of animals and group of veterinarians at that scale, how they do their job, because I'm passionate about this job. So I'm really glad that you pointed that out. So it sounds like you're answering more questions on the health side or operational side, because it sounds like you're doing the mix. But what are cool questions that you're asking data recently? And if it's not a secret or proprietary, but it would be cool to hear what kind of questions you're asking data recently.
I mean, there's a whole, it's ran the gamut, because part of my I've done health stuff where I've looked at trying to find orthopedics, try to figure out orthopedic outcomes from TPLOs versus other surgical procedures, starting to look at that data. I've done things like antibiograms. It's actually a really big thing that we're doing. My wife is an infectious disease doctor, in human health, and so she has to deal with antibiograms as part of her major role, and it's empirical therapy guidelines, right? And so one of the really cool things is that with the Mars system, and I started with VCA because of their software and backend, and it's no reason why I can't expand out, you could actually do data-driven empirical therapy based on patient-specific medicine. I mean, that's a lot of buzzwords because it makes it sound very nice, but basically the fact that the animal's been exposed to antibiotics previously, what antibiotics? The fact that what type of organisms tend to be present during that time in that geographical area. You can actually bring all that together to say, what are the most probable organisms? What are the most likely antibiotics to work? But this is all used as an assessment, not as a replacement of any of the standard medical tools. Because we all know that not everyone can always get a culture, both in time and availability. So we have an ability to start deriving best medicine based on our best guess at using machine learning and advanced artificial intelligence techniques, which is the overarching, umbrella, to basically provide the best information to the doctors in real time. And in those cases, bigger is better as long as the bigger is best. That was a quote from my graduate school, is that bigger is better as long as the bigger is best, because more bad data does not make it better. That's been one of my guiding principles, that if I'm going to add more data, make sure it's the right data and that it's quality, because it actually hurts. It's better to have a core quality set and extend it later than try to throw everything you have in your kitchen sink in and then hopefully find something that falls out that is effective and usable.
Yeah. Oh, I totally get that. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is around structured data and how well is it structured. But then I was like, okay, that's kind of a boring question, but I probably will let you address it. But the bigger thing for me is just kind of how you've arrived here. So you went and did your PhD in informatics, and then you're like, oh, maybe I should be a veterinarian as well. And then you went back to school and did that, which is really interesting in and of itself. But I think where I really want to kind of pinpoint and kind of ask you a question is around the data, and you just kind of dove into it, which is, if there's more data, it doesn't necessarily mean the AI or the machine learning is going to be better. And I always think back in my head to this 94-year-old friend that walked into one of my retail computer stores back when I did that 20 years ago. And he told me this thing that always stuck with me, Jonathan, which is knowledge is like a ball. And everything that you know is on the inside of the ball, and everything that you don't know is on the outside of the ball. So as we know more, we actually know less, which is really confusing. But if I can tie that back into building these machine learning models and trying to solve these complex things, how do you look at that? How do you look at that from a lens of somebody that went and learned everything they could about informatics, or learned how to learn about informatics, and then went and became a veterinarian. And just how do you put all of that together? I'm going to call you a weirdo, Jonathan, and I apologize in advance. But your educational path is so unique that I think you get the title of a weirdo. How do you look at that data?
So the irony is that this path was not the original path I was going on. In college, I was biology and computer science dual major, and friends of mine actually ahead of me all got rejected from veterinary school. Like, do not pass go, do not collect $1,000 type rejection. And they were much smarter, like they got better grades than I did and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, well, that's a problem if I want to compete, right? Coming from Carnegie Mellon. And so where like the average was like a B minus and they were like A students. And then I actually looked at the research and realized that masters and PhD had a 3-fold higher rate of acceptance than bachelors. And then, as my wife says, I got distracted by computers along the way. So it actually is kind of an interesting. My favorite quote for knowledge base, I can't quote the teacher because I didn't get approval, was talking about knowledge. Is a knowledge base is a repository of information that no one has time to remember, but everyone wishes someone else knew. And so it's one of those things that when you're looking through the lens, right, you can't eat the elephant, right? That's impossible. But most importantly is learn from the mistakes of others. I think one of the really important aspects of my back education, as well as veterinary school, you learn it too. Your morbidity and mortality rounds really do help in those cases, is learn from the mistakes of others or learn what has worked in the specific instances. People love saying, oh, it worked there, I'm going to transfer it over. Well, A, you're not them. B, you're not in the same environment. So you can't just immediately transfer over. But if you can say, someone did an analysis and looked at, oh, this did not work when they tested it, or here's the failures of the past, and you can avoid that in the knowledge, that actually colors the lens and clarifies it, because you don't have the small little fuzzy spots that, like when, my son touches my wife's glasses and she can't see anything because there's thumbprints everywhere. The learning how to avoid those smudges, if you can avoid that, you're at least not making the same mistakes. You'll make your own. But a lot of that knowledge lens that I have for applying to veterinary medicine is taking all the stuff I've learned about for years in human medicine, all the cross training, right? The skill set, learning how to learn is exactly how I phrased a lot of my career. And veterinary medicine is very much the same. And taking that knowledge and saying, okay, what can I bring in? What matches? What doesn't? And I've been very fortunate to have some of the best colleagues, friends, and teachers throughout my career that really have helped me be able to stand on their shoulders. Like, I do some novel stuff, but if you can just apply already established technologies and techniques and figure out how to do it in a new space, that in itself is novel, and that will help, because you don't have to test, well, is this even a working algorithm, or is this even a working idea of medicine? You can easily say, okay, I know this works in these situations. What's the same and what's different? And then you just focus on the differences. Comparative anatomy from veterinary medicine is a real reinforcement of what is the same, and then focus on how do you make the different handleable or bridgeable so that you don't have to throw out everything else.
Wow. Well, Shawn didn't go there, but I do want to go about sort of structured, non-structured data. And the reason why I want to talk about it, so in the new gig that I'm in, we were last week we were interviewing this data scientist from he's from Scotland. So, and just talking to this guy, it was phenomenal. He was explaining what he'd done in his life, and he actually graduated from Royal College in the UK, but then he worked for World Health Organization, and one of his jobs, or I guess at his job, one of the tasks that was given to him was to find out why the testosterone levels on Earth are getting lower. Like, pull that data. So he actually was pulling data from multiple countries, from multiple health systems, and then trying to interrogate that data to get that answer. It was just badass. So we talked to the guy, super interesting. I'm hoping we're going to hire him, or at least consult with us. But when you think about it, the data that we have in veterinary medicine, and I know don't start you on this, but basically, you mentioned something. You get to clinical data, you make clinical decisions, and that's the shittiest data in veterinary domain right now. You can't really pierce into medical records, and it's all non-structured and flat and many PIMs. Was Wolfware built with that in mind, that you can actually dig into the medical records, and do you have to mix it in different areas with the non-structured data? And the premise of the conversation that was with that guy, we were trying to approach veterinary data from the structured perspective, and then he threw a couple hypotheses how to interrogate non-structured data in combination. So A, do you get to play with the structured data from medical perspective now? And B, how do you combine the two, or is that something that you get to do?
So Woofer, yes. One of the things about Dennis, the guy who recruited me to VCA, he, like his principal and the people he worked with that I now get to call my colleagues and friends, they have a very strong structural. But structured data is almost a misnomer. It's structured intent, not the data. And the reason why is it's like the people who put in the entire history field the physical exam, right? Or the people who write just a discharge and in the physical exam they say C notes, right? So structured data has like three big components. It's great when filled out in the manner that you design the system to fill it out in. It's worse than unstructured data when people use it for purposes other than what it's intended to, because then you've biased your intent when people pull it out. Oh, it's in this field. I'm going to just pull it there and be right. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, why is there a Schirmer tear test in the orthopedic section? But that's the type of stuff. So there's intent, and there's a lot of really good things that any of these systems, I mean, Cornerstone, EasyYvet, all of them have structured areas. Usage, not, that is a talk in itself, how implementation of systems can actually affect the quality of the data, not the system itself. But for me, it's, you have to combine both. But how you combine both and what are the ways you do it really depend on the content and the veracity of the information you see. So a lot of people will take structured data and say, oh, it's structured, I can trust it. Honestly, in most systems I've done, that is the opposite of the truth.
Yeah.
Because it's structured, that means usually it's a very rigid method of adding data. It's usually like in many systems, human medicine included, they have to do it in certain workflows, and any violation of those two means the data in there is not truly representing, right? What is the point of data? Represent a thought, action, or purpose, right? Or thing. And so if you are not careful when you try just using structured data alone, you actually can be completely go down the wrong path. Like PSA, right, the prostate specific antigen, which is no longer a screening test, was never designed as a screening test. It's like the first thing I was taught when I went to graduate school. It was one of the first things. It was taught as a screening test when there's a mass identified on a CT or on a CT, and you have clinical signs. It was never meant as the flip around, right? So contextually, It was fantastic, but it was never meant to be turned on its head. And a lot of these tests, and you're seeing it now with like COVID, and you hear about like the antibody tests, right? Those are the same thing. A lot of them are not designed for screening. And so if people want to use a screen test, you have different things. So that's the danger of structured data, is that until you validate and make sure that the data is recorded and what it means that it was recorded there is true, it actually can wind up hurting your algorithm than natural language processing or textual techniques, content analysis, tone of voice, things like that, opinion analysis, all those things that can help actually is more powerful on unstructured, because you don't get a coloration from the doctor based on the interfaces you have to use. So it's a paradigm that you have to kind of tug against each other and then have to somehow wrap it around with some other data sources to figure out what it is. Like, I shouldn't be seeing feline stuff if I'm talking about a Great Dane. You can do something like that.
That was so simple and easy to understand. It didn't overwhelm me at all. So thanks for that. And it did make sense. And I think there's another layer of complexity that jumps on top of all of that stuff, is UI and user experience. Because we build these systems, we get engineers to design them. That's how software used to be built. 20 years ago, it was like, well, hire an engineer, he'll build a database, it'll be wonderful, users will love using it, it'll be simple to use. And let's not name names, but we could call it a bunch of different things. And that's the realm in which most veterinarians work today. They work in a system that was created by engineers to do a certain thing that they thought was a wonderful user experience. And so you layer that poor user experience in, and even though you have all of the right boxes to put all of the right data, which would give you beautiful information to build an incredible machine learning model, but people don't use it like that. And so there's this new layer and new frontier as we go forward and use new software that allows the user to interact with the systems in a way that gives them a pleasant user experience, but also gives the data scientist data that they can ingest, which will help build better machine learning models. But the problem, and this is, I think, your newest challenge, the problem is to create systems that allow users to interact with them in a meaningful way and allow the data scientists to get the information out that they want. So all of that was a preface for my next question. I know what you're working on, and I think it's an incredible project. But what truly gets you excited when you go to work every day, Jonathan? What element of this new role, makes you hit the floor on your feet and
You
run to
meant
your
when he will go to work after the COVID, right?
Good question. One of the things I want to make sure we include is that there's a bridge between the software system and the data scientists. That's where the informaticist lives, right? That's the domain knowledge, domain transfer between how someone uses it and the data and what it means. So that's actually the role of the informaticist. So to go towards your question is what gets me up in the morning is realize that if I do my job right, and we all have multiple responsibilities and things like that, and it's a collaborative, but if I can do my job right, and I can help support the team and vice versa, I can hit those goals. I can speed up the doctor by reducing mistakes because I actually use the information in the system to prevent mistakes or configure the system to avoid common mistakes. I can generate better finances, right? Because there's still a cash for service business. I can generate better data because I'm having them plug in the steps naturally, as opposed to having them have to go step A, step B, step C. Make the system understand that if I choose step C, I've already filtered out a bunch of choices of A and B because of how my decision path has been. So once I got to C, maybe not all values of A and B are available. And so I can do that. And then that information is being set up from the get-go. Every single thing I've done is always say, if I can't access it and I can't use it to make it better the next time around, either we should redesign it or we shouldn't do it. Because making someone record something that can't help them in the future is a low yield and low survivability. Everyone here has had experience like, why am I entering this, right? And the only way you can get people to keep doing that is a hard block. Like, sorry, you cannot enter it until you type in your password, right? That's a hard block. But people say, why am I doing this? And that's where like facial recognition, thumbprint, all that stuff is, it stops being a roadblock to log in where I have to type it. Like, why am I keep doing that? All that type of things, if I can remove that to make it more organic, it's going to flow. Everything will be faster. And I don't have to question, did they do this because they wanted to get through the appointment and they'll go back and edit it later? Or did they do this because that's what they intended? And if I can do that and then turn around and help them, because it helps me too as a practitioner, but also helps the thousands of veterinarians, then I know that it will propagate through to all their patients that they help treat.
So it sounds like to create structured data, we need structured databases, structured UI, and structured people to fill it in.
Robots are the answer.
I hate
Robots.
to interrupt this, guys. Yeah. This is 25 minutes into it. We could do 6 episodes in a row. I know this, Jonathan. So, but we have to wrap it up because we will get out of our time frame as usual. Can I ask you, what was the recent book, TED Talk, YouTube video, anything that you've done recently that inspired you and worth sharing on the podcast with the veterinarians and innovators in the space?
It was actually, this is going to sound a little funny, but we were doing a Zoom with my son and a bunch of classmates, and they were reading poetry and it's not like a famous person, but it's something that has always hit home, is that when you saw they were reading a Robert Frost poems, which is, Two Roads Divergent, what is my favorite poem of all time. But when I was looking at that, and it was like the National Library Day, so it was like a really famous poet, and reading someone else's book from history, and you saw that the newest generation was sitting there listening to the current generation talking about the past generation, let alone it's one of my favorite subject matters. It really hit home that if you do it right, what you do can help future generations, and people will learn from it. They won't have to, everyone doesn't have to always create something brand new to have an impact throughout the rest of someone else's life. And you saw that hundreds of children were listening to one person speak about a poet talking about a snowy woods, and he took the road less traveled by. So in my head, it's like burned in. Not only is it important to confront the challenges, but also make sure that you transfer the knowledge and you teach people going forward, or at least support them in their learning in whatever form that may be. And it was just it's one of the things surreal. It's like when you have 5 generations on a call and you're like, wow, we span over a century with just this call, and you realize the impact that people have and can have if you really desire and want to do it.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. It's so interesting to kind of stumble upon something that's unique, but we've all heard that poem and it's wonderful. And to wrap it up, we love to interview the innovators in this space. So who else in your network, or who else have you stumbled upon that you think we should have on the show?
I actually had a few names, and it was challenging, how do you pick one, right? You have a whole bunch of innovative people, and
you can give us a couple. I mean,
okay,
you're the rules guy. I love that you follow the rules, but if you'll give us a couple, then we're more than likely to invite all of them.
And if you give it to us in a CSV file,
it would be a bar separated. Come on. So one of the guys, I don't know if you've had him on, is Ben Lewis.
Yeah, we haven't, and we should.
Yeah. So besides being my roommate in veterinary school, and we founded actually, One Health company together, a lot of stuff he's doing is the translation aspect. So that's something that I really think. One of my old bosses, Anthony DiCarlo, because his idea about, instead of saying too hard, saying how do we do it, also really stuck with me, especially with veterinary medicine, because you go in and you are confronted with a lot of challenging things, and he really helped me. And the last one would be Jim Orsini, Dr. James Orsini, from Penn. He's actually one of the reasons why I went and did an internship. He's one of the main reasons. I was going to do it. I'd been in school for a long time at that point, and he really helped shape my understanding of needs, because he's been doing a lot of technology stuff. He's been really interested in, especially the large animal arena, and how it transfers and how you can apply different technologies. So he's really, really big. So those would be 3 people I'd recommend.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.